Hello, and welcome back to We Were Wondering. I'm Peyton.
And I'm Fiona. And today we are going to be talking about elitism in the college system. This is a topic that I, A, think is just really interesting, B, something I'm very passionate about for several reasons. The first one being there's so much unfairness in the college system, and I think that's very unfair. I don't know. And B, I'm also just like a little bitter, maybe. Like that could also be why I care about this topic so much. Like, why can't I go to Harvard? Um, Anyways, when I say elitism in the college system, I'm primarily talking about the top schools. So think like Ivy League, Ivy adjacent. For those who don't know, the Ivy League is basically just a group of like northeastern schools that are considered to be like very prestigious. It includes Brown University, Columbia University, Cornell University, Dartmouth, Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, Princeton, and Yale. And then kind of the other schools that people group in with these, even if they're not an Ivy League, would be like Stanford, University of Chicago, Duke, MIT. Like those are also typically grouped in. I feel like Stanford, a lot of people think is an Ivy League, but it's not.
That's the one I was thinking of when I said there's one that I think is an Ivy League that isn't. I was thinking of
Yeah,
Stanford.
I feel like everyone always groups them in, but like technically the Ivy Leagues are all like Northeastern schools. So Stanford's in California, for those who don't know.
I actually
Anyways,
did know that.
oh, happy for you.
Thanks.
These schools are very prestigious, but they also have somewhat of a reputation for having very wealthy students. And that isn't because wealthy students are smarter or like necessarily like more likely to be academically successful than a non-wealthy student. That's just because of the way that so many of these schools are structured, and I really wanted to look into why that is, how that structure kind of developed, and why we're consistently seeing, even as people move to like get rid of things like affirmative action, we're still seeing such heavy like legacy admissions and kind of this bias towards people who are in the top 1%. So, looking at a couple studies, I found some interesting statistics. First one, as I said before, Ivies are targeted towards the wealthy. At Ivy League schools, 1 in 6 students has parents who are in the top 1%, which is an absolutely insane statistic. Like 1 in 6 in the top 1%, which, according to Investopedia, if you don't really know what this top 1% is, means that their family is making more than $819,000 a year. So that's like a very sizable
Yeah.
percentage of these schools and very not representative of the college student body as a whole. Now, these students did tend to have higher scores, better resumes, and higher application rates, and I'll get into like why that is as well. But even with this, they were still disproportionately represented within the Ivy Leagues. For applicants with the same SAT or ACT score, kids in the top 1% were 34% more likely to be admitted, and those in the top 0.1% were more than twice as likely to be admitted. Now, the study that I was looking at kind of laid out 3 main factors as to like why exactly this is. The first one is the legacy system. Legacy students whose parents were in the top 1% of earnings were 5 times more likely to be admitted to an Ivy compared to non-legacies with equal scores, and less wealthy legacies were still 3 times more likely to be admitted. And now this shows preferential treatment towards legacy students, which does make sense for these schools. Like it looks, if you have like a very wealthy Harvard alum who's like going to donate money to Harvard, you're going to be more likely to want to let this student into your school. Like it makes sense that it would be operating on this system, but it means that oftentimes these students who come from families who already have an elite background, have gone to elite schools, have a bigger chance of getting in. Now, the next factor they addressed was sports, and a lot of like wealthy people tend to get in on like sports scholarships through being a recruited athlete, which seems like kind of random because it's not like people who play sports are necessarily more wealthy, but it reflects the fact that kind of more wealthy people understand admissions more, and they're more likely to be like, okay, like I'm going to get my kid to play like fencing or like rowing or sailing or like squash or like weird kind of niche like rich people sports, you know? And because they're wealthy and they have less like pressure on them, they have more time to go to practices to really like hone in their sports skills and then get in as a recruited athlete. I think I can't remember the exact number. They were saying like 15% of the top 1% of the students who were in the top 1% at these schools played sports, which is like a higher number than the general population of these schools. So, once again, just reflects the fact that like people who are more wealthy have access to like more resources and just more things to kind of get them in. Because even if you are like, I mean, we talked about this with like the admissions scandal when we talked about nepotism. The Olivia Jade situation, she got in by faking a spot on the rowing team, which is a real thing people do. And not faking a spot, but like
Yeah.
that is a real way to like be able to kind of slide your admission chances up a little bit. If you play some sort of like niche sport and you're good at your niche sport, you're more likely to get in with slightly like lesser test scores, lesser this or that. So that's another way that kind of elite people can keep their admissions rolling into these Ivy League schools. And the third reason was just that wealthy people are able to be more involved. They have a better understanding of the system. These students often do have better resumes, better credentials because they're able to, because they have more resources to. Like when comparing students with the exact same test scores who are applying to these Ivy League schools, the students who are more wealthy do have better resumes. And it's, once again, not because like rich people are more involved, it's because they're able to be more involved, which once again like continues this cycle. I was listening to this podcast and it was a really like interesting analysis of this push towards getting rid of like standardized testing, because a lot of people, I mean, the main reasons are it's like not representative of a student's academic ability, which is true in many cases, and some people have argued that it favors the rich because rich people can get kind of tutoring for these standardized testing. But the person who conducted the study was arguing that testing numbers actually work in favor of less wealthy applicants because standardized test scores are the things that were most evenly distributed across all income levels, compared to like extracurriculars tended to favor the wealthy. Other kind of soft factors like recommendation letters, having higher like personality scores, all these things tended to favor the wealthy. And so when these test scores were removed, it really limited the less wealthy's chances of getting into these schools, which I also thought was very interesting. Looking into this reminded me of something that we discussed the other day. I'm taking like a business philosophy class. We talked about the idea of like a meritocracy, which is, you know, the idea that people get positions based on merit, like based on hard work, based on this or that. And we were talking about whether or not we live in a meritocratic system. And some people were like, yeah, we do. Like people who work hard get better jobs, they get better salaries. But like truly we don't. And I think this is a very like blatant reflection of that, like the whole college admissions process. Because yes, once again, someone who is more wealthy may have a much better resume because they're able to be better connected. But the person who's less wealthy and like has to go home and like watch their siblings while their parents work after school, they don't have time to be like the student council president, the person who has to work a part-time job to like help support themselves. They don't have time to be involved in sports. Like the person who has a bad home life, they don't have the time to like go on these, or like even you think so many clubs have like travel requirements, and if you're an underfunded like district, you're going to have to fund that yourself. If you're not able to fund that, it's not even possible for you to be like the national debate championship. You can't even get to the championship. Like we very much do not live in a meritocratic system. And because college admissions are only looking at certain aspects of a student's application, in so many ways it favors those who are already at an advantage and puts those who are already, once again, at a disadvantage even further below. And it makes it so much more difficult for these people to kind of climb up in life.
I feel like there's this, I feel like there is this American idea of like, what's the phrase? Like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that kind of idea of like, if you're in a difficult situation, you should work hard and pull yourself out of it, like it's an easy thing to do. And like
Yeah.
that's a very difficult thing to do, and that's why it gets so much respect. Is I mean, I think it deserves that respect, but it's so difficult to do and so unachievable for so many people, because also I think we're starting, it's a combination, because I feel like some places are more accepting of not having higher education, and like I think that education isn't as like this is the one and only path towards success. I feel like we have less of that idea now than we used to, but I also think people are going the farthest with education now than they ever have before, so it's like
Yeah.
kind of a toss up almost between the two. So with how like valuable higher education is in the workforce, it's pretty impossible to at least achieve anything comparable to that level of success if you don't have the privilege to pursue that higher education in the first place.
Yeah. Well, that's me and my parents were in town this weekend, and we were talking about that, and they were like, yeah, like back when we were in, because they were asking me, you know, which of my friends were going to some sort of like graduate school and who is like, who basically, who's going to be done with school after this year. And like, I was going through my friends, and I was like, wow, like so many of them are going on to more school. And they were like, yeah, like you kind of have to now. Like for so many fields, you have to have a master's degree or you have to go get your PhD if you want to be successful in them. When it didn't used to be that way. Like my parents were like, yeah, like back when we were younger, like you got your bachelor's degree and like that was, you got your bachelor's degree, you got a job. And now it's so many fields. If you want to be competitive, you have to go on to even more education and you have to get a degree from even better schools. Like there's such this big kind of prestige factor that once again, and to be clear, like the people at these Ivy League schools are incredibly like talented and they are genuinely really smart. But there's so many really smart, hardworking, dedicated, talented people who don't even have the opportunity to access higher education, let alone like crazy prestigious higher education.
It's a very difficult cycle to break because
Yeah.
like we're like kind of rephrasing what Fiona literally just said. The people in those schools, they do deserve to be there, but the thing that separates them from other people is their financial position and their access to that kind of education. And then when you could compare two people who are equally as capable and one just has better access, and that's what privilege is. I mean, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so, but then when you get into the richer families, the more elite people, they're kind of in this cycle of like they've then put their kids through it and like they stay up here, and then other people that are kind of trapped more or less in a more disadvantaged position. It's very hard to pull yourself out of that. So it's not that, you know, those people are any less intelligent or any less capable. It's just that they're stuck in this kind of less advantaged spot. And you get into political conversations about that, about you can't make everything an even playing field because that's impossible, but and expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, that's like kind of the podcast I was listening to was saying, they were like, I genuinely don't think that these schools are intentionally like letting in the top 1%. Like, I don't think that's their goal. But in evaluating these applications, and because of these factors that I talked about earlier, that's what they're doing. Because, like, you see, like, students, most incoming students will fill out, like, the FAFSA, and if they're, like, lower income, that is often, like, indicated. If they've received, like, grants, you might see that on, like, a resume, like, if they qualify for a certain financial aid, XYZ. But once you get kind of past that, they don't know if someone's in the top 1% or if they're like lower middle class or if they're like very like borderline. Like, they don't know at all these students' financial situations, yet somehow, once again, 1 in 6 students who attend these schools do have parents in the top 1%. And I guess honestly part of it even is just like once students are admitted, those who aren't in the top 1%, yep, There it is.
There it is. That was the nationwide thingamabob. Mine went away.
Yeah.
I can't read it because I cleared it to get it to stop making noise.
So
Anyways.
now you know when we're recording this.
Yeah.
But it's like part of it also is like once students get admitted, the ones who go are the ones who can finance it somehow. So that's why this top 1% often are the ones who are going to these schools. Like,
Yeah.
even like some of the schools that I was looking at and like schools I like got into were like, yeah, you're in, but you do have to pay like $80,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's like,
Yeah.
that's not cool.
Yeah. They're expensive schools. It's also expensive to apply to these schools.
Yeah.
I get that on paper they're not intentionally choosing people based on financial status, but they have a way of like weeding people out too.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of them do offer like excellent financial aid, I will say. I know like Princeton recently announced that anyone making under 100,000 will get like full tuition covered. Like for those who are lower income, they often offer like incredible financial aid. Like a lot of these schools will provide like full tuition if you're making under a certain income level. The problem is, A, there's so many barriers for people of lower income levels to access this education and to even get in the first place, like I said before. And B, it's very much like a lot of these schools are like all or nothing, you know, like there's like a cutoff. And then once you are past that cutoff, they don't really differentiate between those who are like in the top 1% or in the top like 30 to 40%. And there's like a very big difference between those two groups. So basically, as a whole, like college admissions don't favor those who are already at a disadvantage. And like that's seen very clearly. Even like we're from St. Louis County. If you compare standardized test scores in our school district compared to standardized test scores of the city school district, there's a huge difference. And it's once again not because these kids in the city are like less smart or like less committed or less dedicated. It's because of the resources that these schools have. And kids who are in these like underfunded school districts who may not have like access to like college counseling or like help when they need it or like tutoring or XYZ are not going to have as strong of a resume or test scores as students who do have that access. And that's a huge issue in the admissions process. But, and my next point is, why does this even matter? Like, because we both go to public schools, and like I'm very happy with my school. I don't really like, I don't need to go to Harvard, you know? So like, why does it matter getting into these fancy schools compared to getting into like the less fancy schools or like going to community college? So another study I was looking into showed that in general, like attending one of these Ivy Leagues and Ivy adjacent schools doesn't really provide that much of an income boost if you're looking at like average salaries. However, it showed that attending one of these schools increased a student's chances of reaching the top of the earning distribution, so like the top 1%, at age 33 by 60%. So like the average salaries, like if you're just looking at that, you're like, oh, like it's not that much of a boost. But if you're looking at like the percent of people who are at the very, very top of the earning system and like who went to this school, who went to that school, those who went to these like prestigious schools are going to be very, very overrepresented. And some of like the most kind of prestigious positions, if you look at like where like US senators went to school, a lot of them went to Ivy Leagues. If you look at another study of former Supreme Court clerks from 1980 to 2020, found that 2/3 of them attended just 5 schools. And this is like around 1,500 people. So like a pretty large amount of people. And 2/3 of these people went to just 5 schools: Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, and the University of Chicago. So like if you want like a government, and these are government jobs, like these are people who are like in charge of like the government and who like make decisions, and
The
they're going
country.
to these yeah, like this isn't just like, you know, like, oh, if you want to work at like
Random CEO
McDonald's
of
down the
something.
road, like
Oh.
random CEO is probably a better example. But like these are like people who are making decisions, and to get these positions, like you've got to go to these prestigious schools. If there are certain justices that like Supreme Court justices that if you look at their clerks, because they get to choose them, like almost all of them went to like Harvard or Yale. And it's like if you didn't go to those schools, you're not even really being looked at, which like sucks for those
Yeah.
who are not able to go to those schools.
And generally, politically, you want people representing you that understand your, like, position, you know?
Yes.
And if a majority of government jobs are taken up by the top, however much percent of like, financial earnings and education and kind of are more elite, then they're not even gonna think of, not across the board, but generally they're not, the government isn't represented of, you know, the American, like, for the people of, by the people, for the people, whatever, which people, you know, is the question there. Not all the people.
No, exactly. And it's the same thing, like if your goal is just to be like in some like business leadership position, you can probably go to any school and like get that position. But if you want to be in like a business leader position of like these like top like firms, top companies, whatever, you have to go to a prestigious school, and that's just how it is. And like if you don't, that's going to put you at a disadvantage because they see, you know, applications whatever from like Harvard, Yale, and that like automatically is like, oh, they're smart, like they're qualified, which once again sucks. And to be clear, they are qualified. Like yes, they are, but they're being overrepresented in many cases, and these schools are really like not accessible for everyone. Really, what it kind of inspired this for me was, as you all know,
This is now
as you all,
the second portion of this episode is Fiona ranting.
well, okay, no, this isn't even a rant. This is just like observations. As you all know, like I'm in the law school application process. As you may or may not know, I spend a lot of time on Reddit, like maybe like too much time. And some of these people are like crazy. And I understand that Reddit is not like representative of the general population. Like even I'm on like the like I look at like the LSAT and the law school admissions forum a lot. And like if you took statistics, which obviously I didn't do, I'm not like that in it, but if you took statistics on like the average scores of like those people compared to the general population, it would be much higher. Because these people are like, I got like a 173, like should I retake the test? And you're like, no, like if you don't know the LSAT, like that means nothing to you. But like a 173 is like a 99th percentile score. Like there's no school that like wouldn't be excited about that. I'm like, no, like you're literally, but so many of these people are like, I have to go to a top 14 school or I will literally die. Like, I will not live my life. I will not be a lawyer. I will not do this if I don't go to this, like, prestigious school. And going to these schools, to be clear, puts you at a massive advantage if you're looking at, like, if you look at, like, employment outcomes, if you have certain goals. I mean, a lot of them are, like, if you're interested in some sort of federal clerkship, like, working for, like, Supreme Court justices, all that. Going to these schools puts you at like a major advantage, but the attitude surrounding them is just like reeks of like elitism. Like it's just like it turns me off from these schools almost because I'm like I don't like that culture. Like I don't want to go to school with these Reddit people. They're really scary. Some of them are mean. And they're like, if you don't get this score, you should retake. Like 100% you should retake. And I'm like, okay, but I think like my brain will like melt
Crumble.
if I try and take this test again. Yeah.
I have two thoughts. Neither are helpful at all. Not even thoughts, just statements. My first is I literally like just downloaded Reddit like not that long ago for something else entirely. But I think my phone listens to you talk because the amount of like law school or LSAT Reddit threads that I get like in my notifications like recommend, I've never looked at them, but I get recommended them, and I get like random law school like ads and things.
Uh-huh.
So my phone listens to you. And then two is I really think you should watch Pretty Little Liars. Specifically season like 5, when I think it's 5, might be 4, not sure. When Spencer Hastings is applying to law schools, because it's really funny and I think it wouldn't help you at all. But
Yeah.
her family's very like elitist, and she like was dead set on going to UPenn, and like there was this whole thing because obviously they're being cyber stalked, so there's some distractions
Obviously,
there.
yeah.
And she like forgot to apply. And like she has a whole episode where she's like losing her mind, and I just think that you should watch it. I think it'd be good for you.
I'll keep it in mind. I'll keep it in mind. I do. It's the way that people like make this out to be like the absolute end of the world, which, and once again, I understand because like I said, there is this like crazy prestige factor to it. And if you're like 100% career angle is to get one of these like federal clerkships or like government jobs, like yes, like going to an Ivy League will put you at a massive advantage compared to like if you went to a different school, like you would have to be at like the top like 1% of your class, you know? But it's also just like it's not the end of the world, and like people who go to these schools are not like better than the average person. And yeah, people on Reddit need to like actually chill out like quite a bit. Like they're very
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my, like I'm glad that I didn't do well enough to go to the same school as you. Like
Some
I
of
don't
it's
want
probably
to be
like
there.
family pressure too,
Yeah.
because they probably have had it like drilled into them that they have to go to these schools because their parents did, or things like that.
Yeah.
Because I also think that sometimes it can create, we kind of talked about the little endless loops, when parents go to the Ivy Leagues and then they expect that level from
Yeah.
their child, like it puts a lot of pressure on the child too, so that could create some
Oh,
of that
yeah.
like frenzied Reddit
Yeah.
people.
That's, I mean, especially if we're like I was saying before, these kids often have better resumes, and it's because their parents understand the system. Like they know that, okay, like if they do sailing, they might get recruited as an athlete. So like they're gonna do this from a young age. If they have XYZ position, like have a higher admissions chance, and I know this, so I'm gonna get them involved in this. Like, no, they don't need to work a part-time job. I'd rather them do like this that I know looks better on an application compared to somebody who doesn't have that knowledge or those resources or the time is like just not going to know that. And that sucks because it means that these people are going to get admitted more. And like that's like a very difficult thing to combat because it's not like they're admitting less qualified students because they're rich. They are admitting qualified students. They're just also admitting rich qualified students because there are more rich qualified students. And yeah, the process is the whole thing sucks. I did not, well, okay, I did have a good college admissions process, but I think I put myself in like a bad mindset, and I was very upset once I realized the reality of the financial situation, that these schools are crazy expensive, and that it was like go into a lot of debt or like don't go at all. Which for some people just isn't. Like for me, I was like, well, I want to go to law school, so I don't want to accumulate this much debt in undergrad and then have to like accumulate even more debt in law school. So that's why I didn't make the choice to go to a different school, because I was like, it just doesn't make sense for me to. And there's definitely so many people in that same situation. And I know I was like crushed when I couldn't go to the school I wanted to go to. And I'm very happy with my decision. But it's just a process that is not good.
Are you still considering going there for law school?
No, because I don't think I would get in.
Oh,
So,
that's fine.
yeah. So that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. Unfortunately, my college statistics are not quite as impressive as my high school statistics were. So,
Oh, mine either.
I'm a little bit less competitive now than I was for undergrad, but that's okay. But yeah, I don't even know if I like have a solution for this problem, because
It's a whole system.
it is. And the podcast I was listening to, like the guy who conducted like a bunch of studies about this and about outcomes and whatnot, he was like, I feel like the best way to combat this is to include financial situation, because then that gives like another factor to consider. But then that also puts you in a tricky situation, because not everyone would want to disclose their financial situation. And then if they did that, then would people who have a better financial situation be put at an disadvantage because of that? And then arguments could be made either way. So it's it's the same thing, like I said, with going like test optional. That might put people who have like great test scores but weren't able to be involved because of the XYZ at a disadvantage. But then it also might put like people who didn't have access to like ACT tutoring at a disadvantage. So it's very system. I think really what needs to happen is changing society's attitudes towards the prestige of these schools. And really people just need to chill out. I mean, I think that's kind of my takeaway from like everything.
I feel like we should just move to the Netherlands and vibe.
Okay. Yeah.
That's my intelligent solution.
That's certainly an option.
They're the happiest there. Anyways. I had a thought, and I don't know. But, like, sure, Ivy Leagues are fun. You know, they're cool. Whatever. They're elite. But you can still be very successful and not go to an Ivy League. And I don't think that... And, like, that I think has to do with how we perceive Ivy Leagues and stuff too, as like this end all be all of like reaching success in certain fields. And but yes, those people start at an advantage, but it doesn't mean that by not attending those schools you're not gonna make it or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think, I mean, honestly, I think the main thing is these positions need to stop being so prejudiced towards Ivy. Like, seeing that 2/3 of, like, Supreme Court clerks attended just 5 schools, I was like, that is absolutely insane to me. Out of, like, 1,500 or so people, a majority of them going to 5 schools, something's got to change. Because I know there are plenty of very smart, motivated, hardworking, dedicated, qualified people who come from schools outside of this group. But a lot of times they aren't even considered.
If anybody listening to this is another Fiona who obsessively stalks Reddit threads and thinks about these things, you're doing a great job. We're very proud of you, and go to bed.
Yeah, if anyone else is on Reddit a lot, let me know. Maybe we could be friends on Reddit. Not that you really like have friends on Reddit, but I do. There's just, Reddit has like all the answers, I feel, and
does it?
not all the answers about college like admissions. I just feel like I like learned so much about society on there. I'm like, how are you, like, what do you do with your life, like, in your free time? Or I spend a lot of time, my other Reddit thread is, I mean, the classic, am I the asshole? And, like, how are these people real? Like, some of them I think are fake, and I know some of them are fake.
Should we do a Am I the Asshole episode?
I actually like almost texted you about that because I'm like I would love to do that. I listened
I
to
have read it now.
yeah. I
I'm
listened to the Smosh Reddit stories
yeah.
like all the time.
I need to not need to want to start watching those. Um I'm like a grandma when it comes to technology. So I'm like the last person to join every app and social media thing. I this is a side story, you can cut it out. But I was running Zoom meetings for the student organization I'm in charge of, and they all just judge me so much because I'll be like, how do I screen share? Like, I don't know how to do it, and it won't let me do it, and I just struggle so much with technology. But I still don't really know how Reddit works. I got trapped in a thread one time and didn't realize I was in a thread. I was like, why is this my whole feed?
No, it's very like it's once you get sucked in it because now that I have like the app, then if I like look something up and a lot of times like the answer when I look like a Reddit post will be suggested on Google and I'll click on that and then it'll pull up in the app and then it's like that kind of stuff is suggested to me so it like always knows what answers I'm searching for, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like like more than even like Instagram and TikTok do. Like I feel like Reddit really targets me because it like it'll target me based on my Google searches. I don't really like read in too much to what people on Reddit say because like I said before, I think the people who are on like college admissions Reddit threads are like a very extreme sample of people who actually exist in real society.
That's
So if you're
fair.
also on Reddit a lot, keep that in mind that this is not representative of the general population.
Yeah.
Maybe you should be on Reddit a little bit less. Anyways, that was kind of our thoughts, our take on elitism in the college system.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there are always going to be ways that any system can be improved upon, but
Mm-hmm.
this idea of these schools being very like targeted toward and over representative of the wealthy population is just something that like I think people should be more aware of, especially if you're
Mm-hmm.
someone who's applying to college or in college. You're doing great no matter where you're at.
Yeah, I didn't have too much
Yeah.
to add to this topic as I'm almost done with school and a theater major. So there's not a ton of elitism there is in the entertainment industry, but in terms of schools, no, actually that's a lie. There totally is. But
Yeah, I
that's
was
a
gonna say, I
separate
feel like
thing.
theater, like you're talking like what,
I've
like
talked about it quite a
NYU is
bit
like,
actually.
yeah.
Yeah, there's elitism within schools. I mean, just with different
Oh,
majors
yeah.
within, that's what I was going to say with the theater program. Like there's a couple different majors in the program and they are not treated equally. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, even, and once again, even like public schools and schools that aren't seen as like prestigious are just not accessible for everyone.
Mhm.
And there's so many people who are at a disadvantage, and that often is like not recognized, and those people are dismissed when, or like seen as like less or less intelligent, when really that is not the case at all. And no matter what you're doing or where you are, you're going to be successful and you're going to be fine, and everything is going to work out. Namaste. And everything will work out even better if you follow us on Instagram, TikTok, subscribe on YouTube, all that. That'll
Mhm.
probably like make your life better. So I would do that
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah. Tune in for a future Am I the Asshole Reddit episode
Oh yeah.
cuz that's not an oversaturated thing at all. Um, just meaning a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
But it's fun, so why
Yeah.
not? And there's a lot of assholes out there, so.
Anyways,
Anyways,
bye.
bye.